All right, you are welcome back to class, and this will be our third class under this topic, attaining competence in the teaching profession. It is still our online CPD program for teachers, continuous professional development program for teachers, and we are looking at what every teacher must know series. So far, we have looked at the introduction to this topic, and we have looked at the characteristics of a competent teacher. We have seen three major characteristics of a competent teacher: what to teach, how to teach, and who to teach. So far, we have seen what to teach. We have seen the benefits of knowing what to teach. We have seen the characteristics of those teachers who do not know what to teach. And we have also seen practical ways by which a teacher can master what to teach. Today, we are proceeding to the next characteristics of a competent teacher. That's the second characteristic of a competent teacher: knowing how to teach, or knowledge of delivery methods. Now, looking at this topic, you will discover that this is the main aspect of teaching. You may know what to teach, like we have initially said, but you may not know how to impart the knowledge. We have said it in our previous videos that a teacher may have A1 in mathematics and may not be a better mathematics teacher. Another person may score C4 in mathematics and may be a better mathematics teacher than the one who scored A1. Knowing what to teach is good, but knowing how to teach is better. So let's look at this in a comprehensive way. There are two ways to go about this topic. We're going to be taking the first one in this month: 20 things to do in the classroom under how to teach. This is what I mean. As you enter the classroom, you have 40 minutes for a period. Your period starts from minute 1. How do you manage minute 1 to minute 40? How do you teach within the 40-minute lesson period? That is what we want to discuss today. As in, you want to teach English language, literature and English language, government, CRS or IRS or IRK. You want to teach languages, you want to teach economics, you want to teach accounting, you want to teach commerce, you want to teach business studies, or you want to teach physics, chemistry, biology, further maths, agricultural science, or geography. And you have 40 minutes. Now we're talking of how to teach. So how do you handle the 40 minutes in a single lesson period? Fasten your seatbelt and let us embark on this very interesting journey together. Get your earpiece if you have one, and get your writing materials. Don't forget, we're going to be writing an examination after these training sessions. So get your writing materials and let us go. Number one, objective. The beginning of knowing how to teach starts from the way you write down your objectives. Example: at the end of the lesson, the student should be able to: 1. Define flower. 2. Identify parts of a flower. 3. Discuss the uses of a flower. Those are the 3 behavioral objectives we want to achieve as we go into today's lesson. Knowing how to teach begins from how well laid out your objectives are. That's why we call it number 1. Now, what are the things you are not supposed to do under objective? You are not supposed to use the word no. You are not supposed to use the word understand. Those 2 words are not measurable objectives, and they cannot help you to have a measurable outcome. They are too subjective and too broad. How do you evaluate a child who knows and understands? That's too broad. So under your objectives, we expect that we will get something like, at the end of the lesson, the student should be able to define, list, enumerate, differentiate, compare and contrast, underline, and so on and so forth. These are measurable objectives. They should be able to describe, they should be able to state, they should be able to explain, they should be able to discuss. These are measurable objectives. That's number 1. Before we see you discussing in the class, before we see you explaining, we want to first and foremost see you writing objectives that are measurable. And if your objective is okay, it will affect a lot of things in your teaching. It will affect your presentation. It will affect your evaluation. It will affect your content creation. It will affect your summary. It will affect your conclusion. It will affect your homework that you will give the students. So that objective is too pivotal to knowing how to teach. So let's assume that you have done your objectives very well. And let me quickly mention this. For many of you, supervisors and assessors will be coming to your school as from January next year. One of the things they're going to be looking out for will be these issues we are talking about. So under how to teach, the supervisors will be looking for 20 items that they expect you to master very well and excellently well in the classroom. I've just mentioned number one. Number two will be previous knowledge. Now that you have stated your objectives, the next thing is to state the previous knowledge. Previous knowledge could be generated in two ways. If it is a topic that you have taught before, that this one is a sequel or a follow-up to the previous topic, definitely you are going to build your previous knowledge from what you have taught last. So we have already taught flower. We have discussed definition of flower. We have discussed part of flower, but we have not discussed uses and benefits of flower. Today, we want to discuss uses and benefits of flower. Our previous knowledge will be the students have been taught definitions and identification of parts of a flower. But let's assume that you are teaching a topic that you have not taught before. Your previous knowledge will be generated from residual knowledge of the students. Let's assume you have not taught flower before. This is the first time you are going to be teaching flower to the student for the very first time. Yes, you have not taught flowers before, but the students have seen flowers before. So the previous knowledge will be generated from the residual knowledge, like I've said. The students have been familiar with flower in their neighborhood and in their surroundings before now. That is previous knowledge. It is very wrong for you to enter into the classroom without having the previous knowledge stated. I told you that this is 20 items. Depending on the assessor that will be coming to your class, each of these items carries 5 points or 5 marks. So the objectives I've mentioned, 5 marks. Previous knowledge, 5 marks. So what this is telling you and I is, if you have done your own work very well, you have correctly stated the objectives, and you have also correctly stated your previous knowledge. That means you have won 10 marks and you still have 90 marks to contend for. Let's go to number 3 after previous knowledge. And your number 3 will be introduction of lesson. Now, introduction of lesson is so germane, so important to lesson period. And some people call it entry behavior, some call it lesson introduction. It's the same thing. How do you want to present the lesson in such a way that the student will be able to relate to that topic right from beginning to the very end of the lesson? That is introduction of the lesson. Now, your introduction must be lively, must be exciting, must be interesting, must be enriching, must be captivating, and yet must be relevant. When we're talking about introduction of lesson, we're talking of the first 1 to 3 minutes. Some people will be magnanimous to extend it to 3 to 5 minutes, but I always say within the first 3 minutes, we should be able to see how strong your introduction is. So when you want to teach, for instance, you want to teach advertising. As you want to teach advertising, you enter the class with one popular jingle. So popular that as soon as you begin to sing the song like this, all the students join you in finishing the chorus. And the class is so interesting Everybody is clapping. Those who are beating drums are beating drums. And when you finish that, you write advertising on the board. That's introduction we're talking about. That's entry behavior. It connects the student with your teaching. The mistake many of us make is we wait till the end of the lesson before bringing in some very interesting items that we want to teach. And that is very, very wrong. Because the student you lose within the first 5 minutes of the lesson, you may never be able to get them back to the end of the lesson. See, when you want to start a lesson, the student antenna are up and high. They want to catch signals from you. So if within the first 3 minutes you are not saying something interesting, you are not saying something exciting, you are not saying something catchy enough, many of the students will switch off, especially the below average learners. Don't forget the brilliant ones, the above average learners, they have high appetite for learning. So anyhow, water will find its level. But for below average learners, it's a big issue. So they will need something to stimulate them. They will need something to arouse their interest. So when you want to teach a particular concept, maybe in economics or in physics, the way you enter, you want to teach now, for instance, and you say, everybody look around you, what can you see? And what can you name? Okay, name anything you see. And then they begin to name chair, they begin to name iron, they begin to name fan, they begin to name table. And the class is interesting within 1-2 minutes. That is introduction, relevant one. So students should be excited. Students should feel that lively environment when they are beginning a lesson, and it should be relevant as well. If your introduction is very good and you manage to score 5/5, that means you've got 15 marks. You have 85 marks to contend for. What will be the next one? Sequence of lesson. Sequence of lesson is the logical and orderly introduction of materials to be taught within a given lesson period. So when you sequence lesson very well, you make it easy for the student to follow you. So imagine that your objectives are well stated. Your previous knowledge was well stated and correctly connected to the current lesson. And your introduction is a wow. Now, the next thing you are going into is the sequence of the lesson. How logically and orderly you present your lessons. Don't forget everything still come to objective. Because in your objective, you have said the student should be able to define flower. 2, should be able to identify parts of a flower. 3, should be able to state the uses of a flower. When you enter the classroom, write out these 3 objectives on the board so that the student will be able to know what you want to achieve for that day. It must be written on the board. It's not enough to be in your lesson note. Before you even start the previous knowledge at all, write it on the board so that when you are sequencing, the students know that when you are done with definition of flower, you are going to parts of flower. When you are done with part of flower, you are going to benefit or uses of flower. If you now decide to waste time, if you decide to digress, the student can be your judge and say, Auntie, we have not treated point number 2. So some people don't follow sequence. If you don't follow sequence for students who are average or below average, you will distort their psychological makeup. Almost all the students in your classroom are analytical learners. I will be talking more about that when I get to who to teach. Analytical learners, they learn more when lessons are sequenced in order, step-by-step approach. So let's look at a teacher who wants to teach agricultural science. And as you want to teach agricultural science, you start by laying the steps to take in farm operations for them. So you say, good morning, class, and all the student chorus excitedly, good morning, sir. And as the chorus excitedly, good morning, sir. So the next thing is he now begin to ask them, Let's go. Number one, we have bush clearing. When I say bush clearing, you say number one. Okay, let's go. Bush clearing. Yes, number one. Now, bush burning. Say number two. Making ridges. Number three. Planting. Number four. Weeding. Number five. Fertilizer application. Number seven. Harvesting. Number eight. So these are our 8 farm operations. Oh, sorry. Between weeding and planting, there should be, between planting and weeding, there should be thinning and supplying. So please change that number 5 to number 6, change that number 4 to number 5. And in between, put thinning and supplying. What I mean now is after bush clearing, you have bush burning. After bush burning, you have making ridges. After making ridges, you are planting. After planting before, I said weeding, but now it's not going to be weeding again. It's going to be thinning and supplying. The moment you do that, you have destroyed the ability to follow the lesson for many of your students. So if they are doing well under introduction, they are doing well under objectives, this is when they are going to switch off. Because we have created 2 fundamental problems for those students, especially the below average learners. Number one problem is they are asking you, they're asking the fellow student, Tunde, please, what did Uncle say we should add? We should insert there. 2, where did he say we should insert it? And because the student may not be patient enough to explain to him, that is where he's going to be out of your class. And he may not be the only one that will be out of your class. There may be 10, there may be 12, there may be 20. That is how you drop. So, but if your sequence is very well in order, you follow the sequence to the very end. Sequence is much more expected in all topics, in all subjects, especially in topics like in subjects like mathematics, where you expect that one step should flow into another. So, if you do well, you have 5 marks. That means you have scored 20 marks. And you still have 80 marks to contend for. The next one will be use of questions. If you have done well up to your sequence, then we'll be talking about use of questions. Use of question is so critical to teaching. In fact, one of the things that differentiates teaching from lecturing is the use of questions. If I'm lecturing, for instance, I don't need to ask you questions. You don't need to ask me questions. I can continue to dictate my notes to you till the very end. If I need to ask you a question, of course, once in a while I throw it. And it's not compulsory. Let's switch to lecturing mode. Good morning, class. It's not compulsory for you to reply me. It is lecturing. Nothing is compulsory in tertiary institution. Oh, bring out your notes. That one also is not compulsory. If you like, you don't bring out your notes, no lecturer is going to beat you. Where did we stop last time? That one is also not compulsory for students to reply. Nothing is compulsory in tertiary institution, for God's sake. All right, let's begin to write. That one also is not compulsory. Now, let's write. The macroeconomic indices and aggregates of developed nations vary from nation to nation depending on the GDP and the per capita income. And this has to do with the availability of resources, both human and natural resources, of the nations under the conditions of indigenization policy or commercialization policy. Andrews Pablos, 1864, in his theory postulated that the comparative advantage of nations differ from nation to nation and could impact seriously on the international trade and intercommunication and geopolitical exposure of the nations, especially in the area of their political leanings and their security exposures. Angela Marfellos, 1962, in his own theory, cited that nations can still excel in international trade if they work on their microeconomic policy that will not compete with their fiscal policy and monetary policy. For monetary policy, we tend towards interest rate, while fiscal policy, we tend towards taxation. In his own postulation, Adam Smith, 1862, talks about taxation of nations could vary. You see, that is lecturing. I can continue like that for the next 2-3 pages, and you will be writing. But if you bring that to teaching, you will lose the students. If you keep talking, for 5, 10, 15 minutes without asking any question, you are going to lose. You are going to lose 50% of your class. That is the problem with use of questions. So, as you have handled your objectives, your previous knowledge, your entry behavior, and then your sequence, the next thing is your question. You must be asking questions from time to time. Question is the oil that lubricates teaching. And it is when you ask question that your teaching will be well lubricated. And in the use of questions, you need to understand basic characteristics of questions. Your questions, one, must have target. If your question does not have target, there is going to, if your question does not, if your question does not have target, there is going to be chorus answers. So question must have target. Now, in use of target, and I want you to go and answer me in the comment section now. Which one is correct? Olu, what is an adjective? What is an adjective, Olu? You will see that I have attached target to my question. But the first one, my target comes before the question. The second one, the target comes after the question. Let me repeat myself. Target before question. Olu, what is an adjective? Target after question. What is an adjective, Olu? Which one do you think is correct? Yes, let me have your responses in the comment section. Okay. We will discuss the results in our WhatsApp group, but let me see your answers first in the comment section. I will give you the answer in our WhatsApp group later in the day. Now, your question must have target. Your question must have distribution. That is, it must be evenly distributed among the A student, B student, and C student in your class. So your question must also graduate from simple to complex. These are characteristics of questions. And the benefits of questioning are so plenty. You use question to get student participation. You see, there are times when students will be looking at you like this. They will just be looking at you like this. You will think they are with you. They are not with you. Just ask them one question. One question like this that you ask them will bring them back to life. Question is also used to task the student pool of knowledge. You know, on a good day, you are not supposed to give the student all the materials that you want to teach. It is the question that will bring out the knowledge from them. In 21st century teaching, is the student that should give you the bulk of the materials. You are just supposed to be facilitator of learning. You want to teach reflexive pronoun, for instance, and you have 5 reflexive pronouns. You should be able to trigger the students through question. If you show them a mirror and you say, who do you see in the mirror? Say, myself. That is number 1. Who did he see in the mirror? Himself. That's number 2. You show it to another girl. Who did she see in the mirror? Herself. Let the two of them look at the mirror. Who did they see in the mirror? Themselves. So you have been able to get the materials through the use of questions. So it is used to task people, pupils or students full of knowledge. And questions are also used for evaluation purposes, for you to know how well the students are getting what you're teaching. So question, very important. So if you master your question very well, that means you have scored 20, and you score 5 over 5 there. That means you have got 25%. You still have 75 marks to contend for. And for the purpose of this video, I'll be going to number 6, which is time allocation. Time allocation is the next under how to teach. Time allocation has to do with your ability to manage the time given for a particular lesson period. If it is a 40 minutes lesson period, we expect that we'll be able to finish everything within 35 minutes. But there are 2 problems that we have noticed in teachers which you need to avoid when it comes to time management. And that is the concept of overloading and concept of underloading. Overloading is giving more than materials that are required to the student within a given lesson period, while underloading is giving less than the required materials to the student within a given lesson period. The two are wrong. The two are negative practices, and the two will impact on your time allocation. If you are guilty of either of the two, definitely you will score low on the time allocation. But if you handle the two very well, you can score 5 marks, and that will give you 30 marks. That means you still have 70 marks to be contending for. But then, when we talk about overloading, how do teachers overload and why do teachers overload? Let's start with the first one. How do they overload? A teacher wants to teach, we're still talking about flour, or a teacher wants to teach water. And he talks about definition of water, talk about composition of water, talks about description of water. He talks about uses of water. He talks about sources of water in one single period. That is overloading. So I've gone for assessment in some schools and I challenge a particular teacher. How don't you think you have overloaded the student? Just look at me and laughed and just smiled and said, even the proprietor know that I'm the most hardworking teacher in this school. Overloading does not make you hardworking. You only make it difficult for students to assimilate the way they should. So underloading is you are supposed to teach water. You are supposed to teach definition of water, composition of water, maybe sources of water. But for 40 minutes, you are on definition of water. And by the time you are getting to composition of water, time has gone. So you have not given the student up to required materials. That is underloading. So that is, we are talking about how teachers overload. Why do they overload or why do they underload? See, teachers do underload at the beginning of the term and they overload towards the end of the term. And the reason is procrastination, that evil spirit that tells you there is still time. So the first week of the term, you see a teacher saying, we're just resuming. Second week is saying, there is still time. Third week is saying, I'm just warming up. Fourth week is saying, yes, we are now starting work. By fifth or sixth week, midterm had come. When students return from midterm, he now begins to rush. That is why teachers eventually overload towards the time of the examination. So if you do this, definitely your mark will go down. But if you do it very well, that means your time allocation is okay, then you can score your 5/5. And if you score your 5/5, that means for all the 6 items you have considered, you have already scored 30 marks. But you still have 70 marks to go for. Don't forget, we are going to 20 items that you must take note of, 20 practices that you must master, that you must benchmark when it comes to teaching learning process in the classroom. Today we have talked about objectives. Today we have talked about previous knowledge. Today we have talked about introduction of lesson or entry behavior. Today we have talked about sequence. We have talked about use of questions. We have talked about time allocations. When I come your way again the next class, I will continue from number 7. Don't forget when you enter the classroom, write the objectives out because you will need those 3 objectives that you have written. You will need them for your sequence. You will need them for your questions. You will need them for your time allocations and for the remaining 14 issues that I'm still going to mention. You are going to write exam on today's video like I've told you. Your school administrator will administer the question to you at the end of this lesson. I wish you all the very best. I will be with you in the next class. Bye.